and accumulation that is unearned, right? You can't earn $1 billion.
That's right.
You just can't earn that.
That's exactly correct.
You can get market power, you can break rules, you can do all sorts of things. You can abuse labor laws, you can pay people less than what they're worth, but you can't earn that, right?
That's right.
And so you have to create a myth that since you didn't earn that, you have to create a myth of earning it. There's a certain level of wealth and accumulation that is unearned.
What?
Right?
But she won't say that to Beyonce or to Taylor Swift. There's a moment in every great American comedy where the villain walks out on stage, adjusts the crown that they haven't earned, and delivers the speech that tells you exactly who they are. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached that moment. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, occasional Cortex, as she's known in some areas. She appeared before the faithful last Friday at the University of Chicago, and she delivered a sermon so soaked in self-regard that even the velvet ropes of the mainstream media could barely contain the glow. She was asked by David Axelrod if she was interested in the presidency, and she waved it off like a peasant who was offering her a smaller crown. Her ambition, she explained, is bigger than any office, bigger than any election, bigger than any inconvenient vote cast by any inconvenient voter. Single payer will be forever. A living wage is forever. Her agenda will be with us forever. Now, that word has a history, and history has read a verdict on that word. And today, I'm going to read that verdict into the record. But AOC is only the first act of a very full show this morning. Rise and freedom, because while she was busy announcing her permanent revolution from a university lectern, the United States Supreme Court handed Republicans the keys to the 2026 midterms. And the Republicans didn't waste a single minute. Tennessee redrew their entire congressional map in 3 days. The left responded with screaming and bullhorns and the kind of theatrical grief that only arrives after you realize you just lost the map and you can't win it back. So Tom Pappert from the Tennessee Star is here. The story's better than the headlines. And speaking of things better than headlines, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has filed suit in federal court against the New York Times for racial discrimination. Yes. Stop your grinning and drop your linen. We're suing them for being racist. The newspaper that built the temple of DEI anointed its high priests and excommunicated anybody who dared question their doctrine, is now standing in front of a federal judge arguing that their hiring practices are merit-based. Oh, sure. Merit-based. This is divine comedy. Jon Miltimore joins us to explain how 10 years of moral preening walked into a courtroom and sat down across from itself. It's a mirror, honey. Look in it. And then, because we've got so much stuff on this show today, Brandon Webb, former Navy SEAL, sniper instructor. Thank you for your service. The kind of man who spent his career teaching other men how to be unflinching under impossible pressure. He wrote a parenting book. And before the audience reaches for their weapon of choice, Robbie, if you're out there, this is not a manual for raising tiny Marines. So the lesson that this man brought home from the most elite fighting force in human history is going to surprise you. It surprised me when I read it. And so we booked him, and he's going to be on the show today. Navy SEAL sniper instructor at 8:30 a.m. Central Time on the Wake Up America show. So phenomenal guests. So, but before that, AOC and her forever agenda. Every free people eventually faces a voice that says their vote is too small, that the market is too free. Their wealth is unearned, and the revolution, when it finally arrives, will be permanent. Now, we've seen this movie, and we know how it ends. It will end with empty shells and full propaganda, with flour used as currency and citizens used as statistics, with promises written in ink and paid for with blood and hunger, and an AK-47 to the back of the head. So tonight, we're going to light the lamp, we're going to open the books, and we say plainly what the comfortable would rather leave unsaid. When a politician tells you that her ambition is bigger than the system, believe her. When the last chapter of that ambition is written, it's not written with ivory paper with a fountain pen. Usually it's stamped on a train ticket. Destination? A very long holiday in Cambodia with a layover at the Gulag and no return flight. We're not going. Rise and freedom.
Last thing before we go to the students, because I would be drawn and quartered if I did not say this. There are a lot of people who would like you to run for president in 2028. Apparently some of them are here. And there are people who, there are others who would like you to run for the United States Senate. Senator Schumer's up in 2028. I don't know. It sounded like even more. Should we do it?
Move to New York or to other parts of the country?
How many would like AOC to stay in Congress? See, they want you to make a move.
Yeah.
What say you about all of this?
You know, it's funny because in this op-ed that Jeff Bezos paid for in the Washington Post, there was this line that you had mentioned earlier about, well, as a potential 2028 contender, XYZ. And in the context of that, it was very clear this was a veiled threat, right? So it was the elite saying, if you want this job, you just stepped out of line. And we want you to know where the real power is. And it's in the modern day barons who own the Post and own the algorithms, and we'll make an example out of you. And what's funny about that is that they assume that my ambition is positional. They assume that my ambition is a title or a seat. And my ambition is way bigger than that. My ambition is to change this country.
So then after that came the gospel according to St. Sandy, the Bronx. Single-payer health care, of course, on the table. And that would be forever. A living wage, raising the minimum wage, forever. Workers' rights, forever. Women's rights, forever. So that word is doing a lot of work, right? So she's telling you directly that elections are a temporary inconvenience on the way to permanent ideological control. Right? Elected officials, for example, come and go. The positions, she's saying, they come and go. Presidents come and go. So the implication is obvious. The policies that she wants are bigger than the democratic processes that produce them. Right? She wants them locked in permanently, regardless of what voters decide in any given cycle. Right? This is a woman describing how she intends to exercise power with or without a mandate to do so. Right? It's not positional. And the media, of course, covered it like she came down from Mount Sinai, right? With Axelrod, he ran 2 presidential campaigns for Barack Obama, who just sat there and let her cast herself as like a revolutionary monk with a congressional pin. She said she's liberated because she never fantasized about being president as a kid, right? She gets to wake up every day and she gets to meet the moment, right? And this is how every power-hungry politician in history describes themselves. They always claim that the power found them, right? The moment summoned them. History tapped them on the shoulder, and apparently the Instagram algorithm confirmed the calling, as if she isn't entirely a product of the algorithm herself, as if big tech and Silicon Valley haven't supported her and propped her up and put her in front of us on all of our news feeds from the very beginning. So of course, they do this so that she can pursue her goals from the House, the Senate, the White House, and this is a direct quote, a shack in upstate New York chopping wood. Right? She's 36 years old. She's never passed a major piece of legislation. Does everybody remember the Green New Deal getting a floor vote? Oh, you don't? Well, that's because it didn't happen. Medicare for all never advanced out of committee. But she's already talking about her legacy in terms of forever. Right? The gap between AOC's self-image and the actual record is the length of a national park. No offense, but...
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
So AOC said that billionaires cannot truly earn their wealth, right? That the fortune of somebody like Elon Musk is built on the labor of others, on public infrastructure, on collective resources, and that this idea of the self-made billionaire is a myth. Would they say that to Beyonce or Taylor Swift? I doubt it. Jessica Tarlov on The Five stepped up to defend her. She said that she cited Obama's 2012 "You didn't build that" speech as the intellectual foundation here. And Tarlov is right that it is the same argument, right? Unfortunately for her, it's like defending a flat tire by saying it matches the other flat tire. Right? Obama said in 2012, if you've got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen, right? He was talking about roads and bridges, but I will never forget that moment. The entire country pushed back. Even a lot of people on the left saying that you didn't build that. If you've got a business, you've got this, you didn't build that, right? Because that argument doesn't survive actual contact with actual human behavior. Because for anybody who actually has been paying attention in the last 30 years, Jeff Bezos started Amazon in a garage in 1994. Jeff Bezos, a lot of people don't know this, but he used to personally pack and ship the orders. He slept on the floor. Every person in America had access to the same roads, same bridges, the same public schools that Jeff Bezos did. Most of those people didn't build a company that today employs over 1.5 million people. Approximately 40% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children, people who in many cases arrived to this country with nothing. They had no capital, no connections, sometimes no English, and these people built something extraordinary. And how'd they do it? They did it using the same infrastructure everyone else had access to. What was the decisive variable then? What made it different? Well, human judgment, obsession, OCD, risk tolerance, execution, right? Being too, having enough courage or just being too stupid to know that you were putting yourself in danger by being an entrepreneur. You ever met a rich idiot? Because I sure have. They're not like the rest of us. Neurotic. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I should try. All right. You got like 180 IQ, but then meanwhile you have like the sub-simian IQ where you're like, you swear that they're a Neanderthal, but they run the local shop and they make a killing. And the guy's got a big fat truck and he's got a boat. And what do you have? You ain't even got a jet ski. You don't even own a jet ski. This guy's got 2. Even idiots can get rich in this country, right? So AOC's framing requires you to believe that the collective deserves credit for individual risk-taking, individual vision, and individual sacrifice. An entrepreneur who mortgages his house, works 80 hours a week for a decade, and fails multiple times before he succeeds. In AOC's worldview, he was just basically a passenger on the public infrastructure train. If it wasn't for that public school, there's no way he could have done that. It's not hard work. It's not sacrifice. It's no sacrifice. It's an insult, right? And Jessica Tarlov defending on Fox News across from people who actually understand how wealth is created, it leaves this whole thing looking like somebody bought a Marxist book club flyer to a balance sheet, right? Here's where it stops being funny, though, because AOC is actually reciting an argument that has been made before by people who had far more power than she currently has. And there are documented historical results. Let's look at this word forever. What does she mean when she says forever? Well, Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela in 1999 on a platform that would feel entirely familiar to anybody who's watched an AOC press conference, right? And then, so he said that the wealthy didn't earn their wealth, that Venezuela's oil riches belong to the Venezuelan people, and then, of course, and that the private sector, they're extracting their resources on the back of the working class, yada, yada, yada. Same rhetoric that we get from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? Then what did he do? Well, he nationalized over 1,000 private businesses. He capped profits. He controlled prices, and then redistributed income directly to the poor through social programs that he called missions. He called it the Bolivarian Revolution, and he told his supporters that his ambition was transformation. Same sermon, different accent, worse ending. Chavez bypassed the media that he didn't like. He spoke directly to the people throughout his own channels, and then he cast every critic as an agent of elite power trying to silence the movement. And then he told working class voters that the system was rigged by the billionaire class. The early numbers even gave him credibility because Venezuelan poverty rates did decline in the early 2000s. But that decline was driven almost entirely by a global oil price spike that Chavez had absolutely nothing to do with, right? So socialists, they never miss a chance to take credit for markets when they're up and blame capitalism after they finish lighting the economy on fire. It's the same for fascists. That Mussolini had a saying where he said, Mussolini had the trains running on time, but the Italian train infrastructure had been fixed before Mussolini even took office or took control of the trains. But they said, the trains are running on time. Thank you, Mussolini, right? Venezuela, same thing. Hugo Chavez expands these programs. He deepened the government dependency. He kept nationalizing industries. By 2007, Chavez had seized control of the oil sector, telecommunications, electricity, steel, cement, banking. But then by 2012, price controls had created shortages of basic goods like toilet paper, flour, cooking oil. The government that called private wealth a myth created a country where grocery shelves that are full became the myth. Now, AOC, she says single payer is forever, that a living wage is forever. Chavez said oil wealth redistribution, that was forever. Nationalized industry, forever. Workers' rights under the Bolivarian Revolution, forever. Right? And what turned out to be forever in Venezuela was poverty, inflation, and hunger. Right? That's the problem with the word forever in politics, right? It sounds noble when they get out. Doesn't it sound noble when AOC gets out there? It sounds like, well, she's really just doing us a favor. Right? It sounds a lot different, though, when you're standing in a bread line, wondering why the geniuses who promise paradise can't keep flour on a shelf. So here's the numbers. These are the ones that AOC supporters don't want you to see. They're not going to post. The algorithm isn't going to let you hear this. Venezuela's GDP collapsed by 75% between 2013 and 2021. That is a greater economic contraction than the United States experienced during the Great Depression. Inflation actually hit 1,000,000% in 2018. That 1,000,000% inflation. Venezuelan currency became so worthless, citizens were literally using stacks of bills as building material, and street vendors were using them as napkins. By 2019, surveys conducted by Venezuelan universities found 9 out of 10 Venezuelans were living in poverty. By 2017, those same surveys found the average Venezuelan had lost 24 pounds of body weight in a single year due to food scarcity. It's not like us with Ozempic. They're literally starving. This was a crisis that was so widespread, it actually got its own name. They called it the Maduro diet. Over 17 million Venezuelans, I think, we're starving. Now, when you talk about Venezuela, the left is always going to say this wasn't real socialism, right? Or they'll say, and a lot of the people who have been one-shotted by communist propaganda will say, well, American sanctions caused the collapse. It's external pressures to blame. It's amazing that communism can't survive without capitalist countries to leech off of. If communism is so strong and so powerful and social and so useful, why do they need trade from capitalist countries? They should be able to make it on their own, right? These are always the same excuses recycled after every socialist failure in history. The Cambodia, it wasn't real socialism. The USSR, it wasn't real socialism. Romania, it wasn't real socialism, right? The explanations always skip over the ideology, the price controls, the massive nationalization that the government undertook, the government strangling people who produce things, chasing them out of the country. Some mysterious force always gets blamed right after the revolutionaries put themselves in charge of everything, right? The Chavez's policies, they destroyed the private sector in Venezuela. They fund those were how they were going to fund the public programs, right? So before the sanctions ever became an issue, the government killed the goose that laid the golden egg, right? And no amount of like and seal clapping AOC on a podcast changes the math.
There's a certain level of wealth and accumulation that is unearned. Right? You can't earn $1 billion.
That's right.
You just can't earn that.
That's exactly correct.
You can get market power, you can break rules, you can do all sorts of things. You can abuse labor laws, you can pay people less than what they're worth, but you can't earn that, right?
That's right.
And so you have to create a myth that since you didn't earn that, you have to create a myth of earning it. There's a certain level of wealth.
It's just that response to yeah, that is exactly right. And it's just like, wow. It's like that. It's like that New York Times article that it was during the Soviet Union. And the New York Times, I think, headline said something like, Russians hungry, but not starving. It was like, what you talking about, Willis? Russians hungry, but not starving. Yes, here we go. Russians hungry, but not starved. But here we go. This is an actual headline from the actual New York Times. It's not going to let me pull it up. There, here we go. All right. Russians hungry, but not starving. Larger cities have food. Walter Duranty. March 31st, 1933. Russians hungry, but not starving. It was a brazen denial of the Holodomor. That was the 1932 to 33 famine in the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Russians hungry. Did they think to ask, you're hungry, but would you say on a scale of 1 to 10, could you imagine the New York Times asking the people, Walter Duranty asking the Russian peasant, they're like, so you're hungry, but are you starving? Are you starving? I know you're really hungry. The New York Times is giving me a budget. I know you're hungry. But are you starving? We are live on the Wake Up America show. I'm hungry. But I can just go get some food. I live in a capitalist country. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning, guys. Don't forget to click the like button and welcome to the show. Hope you had a wonderful weekend and a wonderful Mother's Day. You want to talk about mothers? We had a beautiful Mother's Day. Stephanie I was going to get her flowers, but then I thought, you know what? When you go and you buy those flowers at the grocery store, I don't know if they're just bioengineered to self-delete after 10 days, but they never last very long, even when they come with food and instructions. Put them in water, use this, do all this, right? But they just never seem to last very long after that. So I was like, you know what? Screw this. Let's take her to the garden center and let her pick out a beautiful flower or some kind of plant that we can have in perpetuity. And she wanted a blueberry plant. And you know what? There were no blueberries here in Jefferson City. Everybody bought up all the blueberries, so we had to go to Columbia. And thank you to Quest Fanning, says Durante was a villain in the great film Mr. Jones. Very good. If you're just tuning in, don't forget to click that like button. Today's the first time that you've ever tuned in. Click the follow button as well. We'd love to have you be a regular guest on the Wake Up America show and join us 5 days a week. This show is Mondays through Fridays, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. See, I knew that somebody like Thormock in the chat was going to say, put the flowers in Sprite. No, it's not going to work. They're going to die. So I just let her get a blueberry, and now we can have blueberries all year. Okay, so great. So America is turning 250 years old, and some people are going to celebrate it, and they're going to post a flag emoji, or they're going to repost a reel, and maybe you're going to buy whatever sad mass-produced junk that big box stores cooked up in a conference room between a Pride Month display and a self-checkout machine that doesn't work. You can do better. The 250th anniversary collection at forlibertyshop.com is built for people who actually love this country, who actually love the founding, the fight, the risk, the glory, and the beautiful fact that a bunch of rebellious men in powdered wigs looked at the most powerful empire on earth and said, nah, we're good. So this is the gear at forlibertyshop.com. This is the gear you wear when you want to celebrate America like it means something, not that corporate patriotism crap, because when I go to the stores and I see the holiday collections, even when I go to, and I know I'm going to commit a sin or heresy here, even Hobby Lobby, they have some good stuff, but they don't have the same shirts, hats that we have. And especially when you're going to the stores, not even the big box stores, but like you'll see the grocery stores and they'll have like the patriotic merch. It's not as good as ours. Compare it. Don't believe me. Go to forlibertyshop.com, grab yourself a patriotic polo. When you go to forlibertyshop.com, are you going to find a Keep Calm and Declare Independence shirt at your local Hy-Vee or Piggly Wiggly or Kroger or Schnucks? No, you're not going to find that. So why don't you head to forlibertyshop.com this morning and check out the 250th anniversary collection and start stocking up on your patriotic merch that you can't get anywhere else, because when the 4th of July arrives, you're going to want to have everybody show up to your house with the 250th anniversary flag. You're going to want to serve somebody you're going to want to serve dad a glass of beer in a frosted 16-ounce pint glass with the 250th anniversary logo on there. So are you going to wear the colonial soldier costume apron? I know I am, because I got mine, and I'm going to wear it when I'm grilling out. But my favorite item, and the one that's become a sleeper hit for us, because people who have no idea who we are have been buying a lot of our 250th anniversary merch. But the sleeper hit of the year is the polo. So you should really take the time to go down or just type in 250 polo and pull up the beautiful polo shirt, because that's the one that everybody sees. I wore mine to my Sons of the American Revolution meeting this weekend, and all the guys are like, where'd you get that shirt? I want that. They want to wear it to go play golf in this year. There it is. The 250th anniversary embroidered American flag polo shirt. When you go to forlibertyshop.com during the live show today, you'll help to unlock the bonus content. We produce 5-minute mini documentaries in a Lego theme about heroes of the American Revolution. And I'm already late for my guest, Tom Pappert, so I probably need to go to commercial break right now. But we don't have to watch commercials. Instead, you can watch the mini documentary if we raise $100. We'll be right back with Tom Pappert. It's a Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network. I'm late.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive. And if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanity.
Nobody signed up for that. Noise pollution. Is that a violation of the NAP? Welcome back to Wake Up America. The Supreme Court dropped a bombshell on the Voting Rights Act, and Republicans in state legislatures across the country have been moving fast ever since. Tennessee just became the 9th state to redraw its congressional map ahead of the 2026 midterms. The left is losing its mind, and we're reaping all the benefits. Here to break it all down is writer Tom for the Tennessee Star, Tom Pappert. Tom, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you again.
Happy to be here, Austin. Hey, a week ago, I predicted it was going to happen. I said we'd have new maps by Friday, and what do you know? We've got new maps in Tennessee, and the Democrats, as everybody just saw, are losing their minds.
For those who might have been on vacation or, God forbid, taking some time off and touching grass, Tom, why is everybody screaming? They're redrawing the maps. How did they get this authority? Pretend like I'm 5 years old and explain it to me.
Of course. Well, of course, earlier, I guess it was last month now, the U.S. Supreme Court reined in the Voting Rights Act. And basically, since the Voting Rights Act was passed, it was interpreted to mean that you could draw congressional districts based on race. In fact, that you had to. So if you had a bunch of Hispanics or blacks or et cetera, in your state, you had to draw districts specifically for them so they could elect a representative. Well, the Supreme Court obviously finally decided that this was insane because it just resulted in gerrymandering for Democrats. For example, in Memphis, Tennessee, Tennessee's 9th congressional district since 1972, it's been represented by Democrats. And that's not because Tennessee is such an overwhelmingly Democratic state, or even the Shelby County area, the county where Memphis is a particularly Democratic area. No, it was because of this racial gerrymandering. And who did they elect, by the way, when they allegedly gave the black community a voice? A white guy who happens to be Jewish by the name of Steve Cohen. So I don't understand how that represents the black community. But with the U.S. Supreme Court decision, the Tennessee General Assembly last week was called back into session by Governor Bill Lee with the express purpose of rewriting a bunch of laws and redistricting to get the 9th district to be competitive. And what they ended up doing was a massive redistricting effort that essentially is going to make all Tennessee districts more competitive for Republicans, better for Republicans. We're talking like R plus 20, R plus 18. And Memphis specifically has been, the 9th district is no longer just Memphis. It now stretches from Memphis all the way up to the border of Nashville, and it is going to be a massive Republican stronghold. The early favorite is a guy by the name of Brent Taylor. He's self-funding his campaign. It's going to be extremely fun to watch over these next few months.
So I'm so thankful that we have a Tennessee expert here to give us the news. I mean, you're right there in the belly of the beast, reporting live for us here. I'm so grateful that we've got Tom Pappert on the Wake Up America show. Click the like button if you like this kind of on the ground, boots on the ground reporting. But In Tennessee, so you were talking about this Steve Cohen guy. So the Democrats were mad that we were redistricting out this white Democrat, Steve Cohen, and they're saying that it would be replaced by a black woman, Charlotte Bergman. Is that the case, or what's the story there? Because if so, then that kind of goes against the left's narrative on this.
Well, she is on the ballot, and that is the great irony of this. Is so Steve Cohen, before this redistricting process, white incumbent, he's been there since 2006 was the first time he was elected. So 20 years this guy has been, quote unquote, representing Memphis. He had a Democrat challenger by the name of Justin Pearson. He's the guy the viewers may have seen over the weekend. He was at like a high school graduation. He was delivering the commencement, and he starts jumping up and down and screaming. That was the most bizarre thing I've seen in my life. That's Justin Pearson. He was challenging Cohen from the Democrat side. Well, from the Republican side, yes, you had a black Republican woman who is sort of like a perennial candidate in Memphis. She's been fighting the good fight when it's essentially been unwinnable. It will be interesting to see, with her name ID and reputation for running in this race, how she fares against the state senator who made it possible. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I have this clip playing in the background showing Justin Pearson from 2016 to 2026. So in 2016, looks very respectable. He's clean cut. And then I guess he must have figured out that racial animus politics sells, because then he's like dressed up like Mufasa from the high school's production of The Lion King, Simba. Or it's like it's like Eddie Murphy in Coming to America. I don't know if you've seen that. Maybe
yes.
It looks more like hers.
Well, it's very interesting, Justin Pearson. There's 3 of them in Tennessee. They're called the Tennessee Three. They were famously kicked out of the General Assembly back in 2023 for their role in a pro-gun control riot that took over the General Assembly. So all 3 of them were kicked out. Everybody thought, well, they must be close allies. They must be like best friends. I bet they hang out in the Capitol together. No, I don't think so. I think that maybe Justin Pearson is not the close ally of the Democrats that he thinks he is, or that other people might like to think he is. I don't think he actually believes this. I don't think that he is a true believer. In other words, if you look at that video that I think you just showed of his college career, where he's clean cut, he's speaking like a normal person, and then you look at him gyrating and gesticulating on the stage the other day, I don't think that he's being authentic. I think he's putting on an act, and the reports that I've heard is the rest of the Democrats in the General Assembly know this. They're not a big fan. In fact, I bet you that deep down, they're happy that as a result of this redistricting, they're not going to have him in the General Assembly anymore. They're not going to have him in Congress to worry about either. He's going to go be an activist in Memphis, where he's going to make Elon life's life a little bit more difficult.
Twitter is not real life. Things are better than the doom scrollers would have us believe, Tom. They want us to be disillusioned. They want us to be dismayed. They want Republicans not to turn out for the midterms this year. There are a lot of people on the right who call themselves right wing are out there saying seriously that we should be voting for the Democrat in the Republican governor in the race between Vivek Ramaswamy and Amy Acton in Ohio. They want us to be blackpilled. They don't want us to vote for the Hindu libertarian nationalist guy. They want us to vote for the leftist COVID lockdown Democrat. But I don't think that the American people are buying it, because Vivek Ramaswamy got 80% in the Republican primary. Christian Republicans, right-wing Republicans, voting for the Hindu libertarian nationalists, which gives me a lot of hope. But the guys that work here at my shop at the For Liberty Network, they love the betting markets. They love the prediction markets. And I admit I've kind of started to pay a little more attention to it recently. But the prediction markets on Call Sheet now have Republicans at 58% to hold the Senate after all this. So we're up 10 points from mid-April lows. Polymarket, which is another betting website, they flipped from favoring Democrats to a 51-49 Republican edge. So are the markets pricing in these redistricting gains, or is something else driving this shift? What do you think it is?
Well, I think it's what you said in the beginning. Twitter is not real life. X, I guess we should say, is not real life. It was briefly for a minute, from like, I don't know, maybe October of 2024 until February of 2025, it felt like the app was real life. We felt like we had a one-to-one comparison to what was happening in reality. But since then, I mean, if you had just used X as your barometer, you would have said that Casey Putsch would be not only the Republican nominee, but he's going to be the next governor of Ohio, and he's going to win in a landslide. And instead, he got 18% to Vivek Ramaswamy, who, despite being a really effective communicator, I think his immigration stance made him a relatively weak candidate that should have been beatable from the right. But this guy was too busy, burning MAGA hats on Twitter and saying that Trump is part of the Epstein class and something Israel. I mean, there's really no appetite for this. And so I think that meanwhile, actual Americans, they're enjoying an economy that has improved despite the gas prices elevating due to the war. They're enjoying, though, beyond the economy, something greater than the economy, and that is a culture, a milieu in this country that for the first time in a decade, the oppression has been lifted. You're not being attacked for your microaggressions anymore. DEI is being purged from anything that gets a federal paycheck, including the education system. For the first time, it's not perfect, but it seems to the average American like the cultural aspect of being an American is improving. And so that, I think, is in no small part why the Republicans are looking good. But when you add in this redistricting, Austin, you mentioned the Senate is looking good. I've heard from experts the Senate was never truly in question. But you're now looking at a infrastructural 16-seat gain for Republicans. This means that you could see Republicans keep the House or lose it by 2 seats in a midterm year. Unprecedented. I don't think this has happened since FDR was in office. That is what Trump has accomplished. That's how good this is.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room here, or some would say the rhino in the room, depending on how you look at it. Thomas Massie, does he hold on to his seat? Is his challenger got any chance to beat him? What do you talk to us a little bit about the dynamics of the Thomas Massie Ed Gallring race?
Well, it's very interesting that you've seen Thomas Massie sort of shirk away on X. I hardly see anything from him anymore. I know he went on Tucker Carlson the other day, but I didn't even see a bunch of clips from it. And of course, within the district itself, you have a bunch of real American patriots who love their president, Donald Trump. And so Massie has been sending all sort of mailers, all sorts of targeted advertisements saying, I agree with Trump more than I disagree with him. And I'm really the original MAGA guy, and I'm going to help MAGA lead it into the new future, the new world. So I think that Massie knows he's in trouble. He knows that the big guns are all squarely pointed at him. He's raising a lot of money from out of state. I think it's a coin flip at this point, whether his challenger, Ed Gallring, is going to be able to pull off the victory. I will say that his consultant is, of course, the same consultant who is Trump's consultant, his successful presidential campaign in 2024, Chris LaCivita. LaCivita is projecting confidence as the primary approaches. It will be interesting to see if that translates to actual results on the ground.
I want to support Thomas Massie. I've supported him in the past. I've given him money in the past. I've met him several times. I know many of the people in his inner circle, but every time I voice even the slightest of criticism about the strategy, I get called a Jew or a pedophile or a pedophile defender. So it's really hard to support Thomas Massie, not because Thomas Massie himself per se, but that it seems like everyone in his circle is swirling the drain of a toxicity, Tom, of which, I'm kind of a normal guy. I don't like hanging around people who the majority of their time is spent talking about pedophiles and pedophile conspiracies. Not that we shouldn't bring down the pedophiles, but I mean, can they just be normal for 5 minutes, or what's going on over there?
I think a lot of it is covering up for inability to actually make progress. I can only assume that Massie realizes that at this point he has screwed up. He screwed up in 2 different Trump administrations. He had the ability. All he had to do, Austin, was maybe vote for the big, beautiful bill. I know maybe a lot of people in the audience are gasping right now, but that is the reason why the country is improving. It gave Trump what he needed to accomplish about 85% of his agenda. And if Massie had just held his nose and voted for one or two bills that his libertarian core was offended by, then maybe President Trump would have turned around and supported him in this race. Then maybe President Trump would have turned around and helped him accomplish some libertarian agenda items like improving the state of currency in this country, etc. But instead, Massey has called Trump a pedophile effectively. He's held these rallies where leftists hold signs saying Trump is a rapist, and he doesn't disavow it. He's standing 5 feet away from it. So that is who Massey is now. He is an anti-Trump figure. You can't take stuff like that back, Austin. If you call me a pedophile, I'm sorry, we're not friends. And if I ever see you, I'm punching you in the face. Yeah. That's what Trump is doing politically.
Yeah, I agree.
Massey is going to have a big black eye.
Yeah, I wouldn't forgive somebody like that either. You know, I just, I don't want to have anything to do with him because it wouldn't, I mean, you could be politically correct have all the right policies. But if you're a despicable, scummy, low-life human being, then I'm going to judge you by that behavior, how you talk about people. And so it's a question for me. I mean, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of Trump. But the problem is that at first I thought that they could be reconciled because they did get back together. There was this kind of moment where Trump endorsed him against the Democratic opponent. Do you think that could happen, Tom? I mean, it sounds like the bridges are completely burned. But if it's Thomas Massey versus a Democrat, I mean, will the White House just stay out of it, or what do you think happens?
Well, the Democrats, it's a very Republican district. There's no chance a Democrat will win first. And second, the Democrats are not going to spend any money on this race because they love Thomas Massey. He is one of the only people in Congress who can keep President Trump from enacting his full Make America Great Again agenda because he is one of the 2 Republican votes in the House to stop it. It's literally that slim of a margin. So no, I don't think you'll see an eventual endorsement if Massey ekes out a primary victory from Trump. But Massey would win anyway because it is an overwhelmingly Republican district, which makes it all the more insane, Austin, why he is getting support from these Bernie Sanders Islamist groups that are on the radical far left. I hope his voters, his constituents are learning all this.
Yeah, no, I do think that it's important to be able to work with other people. And politics is about the art of the compromise. It's about the second best. See, I've spent so long working in the libertarian movement, Tom, that I'm familiar with the psychology here. There's this belief that if you can't get a silver bullet answer to whatever the problem is, meaning that whatever policy that you're pushing for, it has to solve every single problem all at once. It has to be a perfect solution or they don't want it. And so I guess what you're talking about here, Tom, is you're talking the language of compromise to people who don't have that in their playbook, in which case politics is probably not for them, right?
Well, and there is 2 sorts of politician that I think a libertarian can be. You can be a Dr. Ron Paul. You can be a Dr. No, where that's all you do. You are known as the guy who votes no. And the Republican Party will understand that. They certainly made the allowance for Dr. Paul. But that's not what Massey does, because Massey, when Biden was in office, was all the time working with House leadership, whether that be Hakeem Jeffries or the Republican side, to help Biden essentially pass his legislation in exchange for concessions that Massey found appropriate. So Massey was willing to play the political game when a Democrat was in office, but when a Republican is in office, somebody who is more inclined to help him achieve his libertarian agenda, then all of a sudden Massey does this game. He plays this game where he is a principled libertarian who just has to vote no. So that's why I think you could be a Dr. Ron Paul. Even in 2026, you could get away with that, voting Dr. No on everything, but you don't get to play the game with Democrats and then act like you're holier than thou when Trump is in office and think you're going to get any support from the Republican Party. Massey is certainly a free, independent human being. He can do whatever he wants, but his political future, I think, is almost over.
Yeah, that's a shame because history could have turned just a little bit in a different way. He could have been the head of the USDA. He could have passed the Prime Act And he could have played a large role, him and Rand Paul, I think. It's a huge missed opportunity for people like myself who believe in liberty, who believe in individualism, who got into the movement because of Ron Paul. And it just feels like there's a failure to understand the moment amongst the liberty community, right? This is kind of why the Tea Party movement we passed on from them to some extent, why Trump was able to take over the Republican Party and the right, because Trump seems to understand something that a lot of well-meaning, even conservative grassroots activists, a lot of those people who became never Trumpers, Tom, many of them, if they didn't go full Democrat, they're effectively Democrat. I mean, you were complaining about Code Pink and some of these leftists who are supporting Thomas Massie. But you'll see frequently a lot of this kind of horseshoe theory, not just with Cenk Uygur and Marjorie Taylor Greene because of the Israel question, right? The sort of the Israel derangement syndrome that has injected itself into the right. But you'll see people like David French, old conservatives who are so triggered by Trump. What I think it is, Tom, to some extent, and I wonder if you could close out your statement with what your belief on what it is, this Trump derangement syndrome that has turned them, that has Massey people calling Trump a pedophile, has people like David French and the old neocons, freaking out about him. But I think it is in part this disease of Trump actually decided not to lose to the left. The conservatives and the Republicans, they were fine with John McCain and Mitt Romney, and they were okay with Jeb Bush. They wanted to keep losing slowly because that was comfortable and they felt respectable and decent. And Trump is indecent and disrespectful, and he kicks their asses, the left's asses, on the field. So is it a jealousy thing? Is it an ideological thing? What do you think it is about Trump that he has turned so many what might have been stalwart conservatives and Republicans and libertarians now on their ears?
Well, I do think it's an ideological thing, and I'd argue that what Trump has really done is revealed these people for who they really are. In other words, when I first learned about libertarianism, I was 2011, I was 17 years old, and it seemed almost like an apocalyptic political ideology because once you learn the actual state of affairs, it seems as though the country is almost gone. And so you would expect people like Massey and Rand Paul who understand the dire state of affairs in the grand scheme of things, at least in 2016, that they would think, okay, this is our big opportunity. We have an in, we have a moment, we can make some progress. And instead, what have they done? They've sat on their hands, they've postured, they've talked about presidential campaigns. It's been a giant, for them at least, in their paradigm, it's been a total and complete waste of time. And same with these neocon kind of legacy Republicans, where for an entire generation from 1980 until 2015, they were the vanguards of the conservative ideology, and they were the only thing standing in the gap when Obama was in office. And then they get a Republican who, as you said, may be a little uncouth, and it exposes that they didn't actually care about opposing leftism. They didn't care about opposing Obama. They cared about keeping their status, their well-paying job, and their roles within the Washington, D.C. dinner party culture that they were so enmeshed in. I think that's what Trump has done. He's revealed people as not the actual fighters and not the actual warriors who they claim to be.
That's Tom Pappert from the Tennessee Star. Tom, it's always great to have you here. Where can people follow you and read more of your work?
You can always follow me on X at @RealTomPappert. And if you want to read my work, go to TennesseeStar.com. Austin, thank you so much for having me on. It is always a pleasure. I think that your show is one of the few out there that are actually sharing real news. So thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome, Tom. Yeah, it's a no bullshit zone here on the Wake Up America show. Have a good one.
You do the same.
That is they're trying to, but DEI, the point of DEI, you can talk about its execution, you can talk about degree and duration, but the whole point was to stop minorities from being excluded from places and institutions that matter in American advancement. That was the point.
I'm not sure that's what the point was. I think that would be a sort of, pardon the way I'm going to say this, I would say that would be a slightly naive way of looking at it. I think that these people that are pushing this stuff are way more nefarious maybe than you think.
What do you think they want?
I think they actually want to upend all of the meritocracy that America has been built on. I think they would gladly shred all of our founding documents. I think that's very clear. Listen to what they're saying at these campus protests. They're starting with Israel, but the United States is the big fish. They want to make sure that we are going to degrade. They're not trying to lift everybody up. That's what equality does, the equality of opportunity. You know that, obviously. They're not trying to lift everybody up. They are trying to take a hatchet job to people that have become successful so that your kids will be discriminated against when you just said your son is graduating college now, right?
No,
so
high school.
Okay, sorry.
I can barely take where I am.
Graduating high school. Okay, so I assume he's going to college?
Yeah.
I would recommend he doesn't. That guy
There
over
we
there.
go. That's my good buddy Dave Rubin there. We're going to talk about DEI and meritocracy with Jon Miltimore here in just a moment. Looks like we've got a new guest in the chat, Uncle Smitty. How's it going, Uncle Smitty? He says, where can I watch to get your position of Israel's influence on America? Well, that's a tough question because I've done that across multiple episodes. But the best place is to probably read my manifesto. There's a manifesto I've written in 2 different iterations. One is a longer version. This is the shorter version for you, Uncle Smitty. If you're looking for my undistilled commentary on Israel, you might want to watch the episode that I did recently where I talked about the Israel grifters. So if you go back and see some of our previous episodes, I did one last week. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Israel grifters, the ultimate leftist psyop debunked. One of my older episodes there. I think it was like last Monday or Tuesday. So check that out. Or you can also alternatively read the Manifesto for Libertarian Nationalists that I wrote in the that I dropped in the chat there. So if you want to have a read, you can read that one and also read the first version of that as well. I'm grateful to the over 100 people joining us live this morning. I know you have a lot of options. I know you could be watching a lot of different shows this morning, and I'm glad and grateful to have you here, even if what I'm saying might be, rubbing you the wrong way this morning, that you can hear opinions that you maybe disagree with and still engage. I'm glad to have you here, so thank you. So don't go away because we are going to have a quick little commercial break here in just a moment. But I just want people to know that we are a show that is sponsored, and I'm glad and grateful to sponsor with our friends at Expat Money. You know what's not a financial plan? If you're just sitting around hoping that the same people who can't fix a pothole are going to protect your financial future. This is why people need a backup plan. Expat Money will help you think seriously about what life could look like outside the United States, whether that means a second residency, a new place to raise your family, or just knowing you have options or want to spread your money around and not just have it in one banking system. So this isn't about being panicked, because I won't tell you that everything's going to fall apart and you should be terrified, but I will tell you that, your great-grandparents crossed oceans for opportunity. You can click a link and check out how to diversify your assets overseas, like people like Mitt Romney do. Don't leave it to just the rich people to take advantage of all of the opportunities to spread your wealth around and to grow it. Check out expatmoney.com/Austin. That's expatmoney.com/Austin, and start building a plan B today. Now, don't be like a lot of people, because when I was selling gold at $800 an ounce, people were like, oh, yeah, gosh, $800 an ounce. And now it's like, what, $5,000? Think about I think Kermode bought a bunch of silver from me, and now he's like, AP, thank you. All right, now don't go away, because we're going to have a quick commercial break. We're going to talk about the New York Times being sued for equal opportunity because the New York Times was discriminating. We're going to talk to Jon Miltimore about that. Don't go away. Just grab some gear at forlibertyshop.com. Every purchase you make goes to unlock that bonus content. We'll be right back. This is the Wake Up America show, and we're on the For Liberty Network. Kermode, you're welcome. I got you. 'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. George Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com.
In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up, he keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government. Get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
The left in America tells us not to have kids to save the planet, but in Cuba, they stopped having kids because the state destroyed the earth.
Collectivism doesn't create justice. It creates shortages, corruption, and power for the few. I've not just seen it, I've lived it. My family escaped it. Now the same failed ideas are being sold to a new generation. I'm here to expose the lie and defend liberty. From Cuba to Argentina to the United States, the freedom movement is rising. Cafecito Libre is the exile voice of economic truth. Cafecito Libre, premiering March 3rd as part of the For Liberty Network, only on Rumble.
That's what my daughter Hazel looks like when I tell her she can't have Skittles for breakfast. Good morning. Rise and freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show, and that's on the For Liberty Network. Great numbers on the show today. Hey, guys. Everybody over in the chat, you're all mad at me because I like Donald Trump. Well, too fucking bad. My next guest, he's probably going to roll his eyes at me too, but I think the next topic we will agree on. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has filed suit against the New York Times in federal court, alleging that the paper violated the Civil Rights Act by passing over a white male employee for a real estate editor role in favor of less experienced candidates. The Times says this is a politically motivated attack. Jon Miltimore from AIER, American Institute of Economic Research, that's a long title. He wrote the piece on this in the Washington Examiner. John, welcome to Wake Up America.
Hey, good morning, AP. How you doing today?
Doing great. John, what is this lawsuit about? Lay out the basics of the lawsuit.
Well, basically it comes down to whether or not the New York Times violated the Civil Rights Act. Under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, it's illegal to do race or sex-based hiring. The New York Times says they weren't doing this, but if we just rewind a few years, everyone was doing this, right? This is really the foundation of DEI, where you prioritize certain candidates based on their race or sexual orientation or their sex. And if you read the New York Times, they had a report of this themselves. They talked about their 2021 call to action. In that action, they were talking about how they're going to prioritize minority candidates. You had a candidate that, for a job that didn't like this. He was a white guy. He's unnamed in this lawsuit, but he apparently had years and years of experience as a real estate editor, and he was applying for a promotion, and he was getting nowhere. Meanwhile, you had minority candidates only that were being interviewed for this position. And according to the lawsuit, the job went to someone with virtually no experience in real estate editing. So I think the suit against the New York Times is probably pretty strong. And it's interesting that they talk in their response about how we hire and promote based on merit. And what I tell other people, this is what we've been saying for years. This is all we want, is to say that we should be hiring people based on merit and not these other characteristics. But for years when we say that, we were kind of hurled racial slurs and things were hurled at us over this, saying that we oppose DEI, and if you oppose DEI, you're a racist.
Yeah. The chat is already lighting up because people have all had this experience. It's common. Quest says his friend Katie's white nephew had an impossible time getting a job as a sports reporter coming out of college. It was very clear it was based on race. They're looking for minorities to put in these roles. As a matter of fact, you kind of, if you're a business owner, you kind of have to hire at least one, because it used to be you didn't want to get sued by the Equal Opportunity Commission because you didn't hire any minorities.
No, that's right. And what's funny, if they would have had, all the New York Times had to do was have a token white guy in there, to say, oh, you were a finalist, right? If you had a token white guy, there would at least be that pretense that you were kind of not making this all about race. They weren't able to do that. They had a very experienced guy that they, I think they wanted to all these candidates were minorities that got through. And again, I do kind of think, was this politicized? Well, probably. But that doesn't mean the lawsuit isn't true. I think, the Trump administration, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, went after the New York Times for a reason. They're making an example because you had for years, all these firms, corporations, institutions were using race as the very top echelon in their hiring. We saw it with Harvard, right? Harvard says, of course we can use race in our admissions process. It was only a couple of years ago that the Supreme Court said, well, no, actually you can't do that. And I do think it's important to talk about one thing. For years, if people did file a discrimination lawsuit, anybody can go do that. They can say, like, I'm going to file a lawsuit saying I believe I was discriminated against. The problem was you had two different standards. You had one standard if you were a minority, and you had one standard if you're part of a, quote, majority group. And the evidentiary standard for that majority group was extremely high. That meant even if you had you had a very strong case, you weren't going to get anywhere. And we saw this with the case of Marlene Ames. She was somebody that filed a suit. She's heterosexual, and she was not promoted and actually demoted. And it came down to her sexual orientation. And court after court said she had a strong case, but she couldn't get over that evidentiary standard, that separate standard. But last year, the Supreme Court, in their ruling, Ames versus the Department of Ohio of Youth Services, they made this definitive. They said, no, you can't have two different standards for a minority and a majority groups. And I'll point out, Austin, that was a 9-0 ruling. It wasn't like you had 5 Supreme Court conservatives that said, we're not going to allow that, but 4, left-leaning justices said we're going to. It was unanimous. They said you can't have two separate standards.
So the New York Times is pushing back on this when they're calling this suit politically motivated, John. Their spokeswoman said that their employment practices are merit-based. So you note in your piece that the word merit-based is pretty remarkable, of course, because this is the New York Times, because they've spent years building an explicit diversity infrastructure. So obviously this is just legal cover. But don't you think that they're just going to change the name and do the same thing that they want to do under a different name? And can the government really stop them, John?
Yeah, I think you're going to see some, organizations do that. In fact, we've seen that. My colleague Corey DeAngelis has been doing a very good job of exposing this on social media, where you have, leaders of these departments who say they're still fighting the war for DEI. They said they can, like we have the support of the dean here. We're going to keep doing this. We're just going to call it something else. And it's great. You have undercover reporters that are exposing that. So yeah, I do think you're going to have some people try to do that. But the problem is, it's going to be harder to do than people think, because, like I said, there's not separate standards anymore, where if you are a white guy or a white woman or just a straight person, and you have a pretty strong belief that you might have been discriminated against on these grounds, now you can go to court, file a lawsuit, and you don't have to meet some extraordinarily high bar. All you have to do, and that is going to put firms, they're going to be much more cautious about this stuff now, and having these DEI programs baked into their hiring processes, because it's going to be a legal issue for them.
How many elections are we away from having this overturned, John? Because isn't a lot of this stuff, the adjudication, a lot of the stuff that's going to go through the courts, it's very dependent on whether you have a Republican or a Democrat administration picking the judges, isn't it?
It is, I like to think it's not so bad yet. Like you do have, again, like I said, the Supreme Court, give credit to these justices like Kagan and Sotomayor, who looked at this and said, no, you can't have two different evidentiary standards. That doesn't make any sense under a law that's designed to treat people equally. So I'm encouraged by that. I do think that the court system is going to grind out DEI. And I think you've already seen employment law firms. This is something I wrote about last year. They're already changing their guidance to all these companies have people that, lawyers advise them on these things. And employment law firms last year were saying, you need to look at this stuff very closely. And this New York Times case, it goes back years. That's why I said one can almost, not quite, but almost feel bad for the New York Times because all of this was they were just playing the same game as everyone else. It wasn't like the New York Times was doing something differently than, say, Apple or most universities. All of this was happening across all these organizations, all these firms across the country. The New York Times, I think, is being trotted out as kind of a political warning to everyone, saying, no, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. We're not going to tolerate blatant discrimination.
So this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? There was this court case last year, Ames versus Ohio Department of Youth Services. This was this case involving the heterosexual woman who was denied a promotion and then later demoted. So talk us about how is this changing, this majority group discrimination claims and their litigation? How is this in flux? I mean, what do we expect to happen in the future? Say Republicans, the political process continues to play out. What more can happen?
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of flux happening anymore. What this means is let's say your wife, Austin, works at a company and she thought she was discriminated against because she's just a straight woman, and the company really wanted to fill that. They felt they wanted to get more balance and they wanted to hire, say, a gay man. And if they had a hiring process that made it look like, yeah, we were kind of really trying to use sexual orientation here. What she could do is go file a lawsuit, and now she has the same standard as everyone else, and this will be able to make its way through courts. Like I said, for years this was happening, but people that wanted to file lawsuits on these grounds, they'd get nowhere because basically what you had to do is show that these companies were going to be an unusual company and that they were going to you pull in statistics and other evidence to show that they're going to actively discriminate against a majority group. And because of that, you'd get nowhere. But now we have the same standards for everyone. So I think companies are going to be very, very gun shy now about having these DEI programs. And especially after this case, if you just now it shows it's not just about an employee can go sue you, but you might have the equal employment office coming at you now too if you're doing this. I think it's a game changer. And like I said, I did predict last year after Ames, I said it's going to be a wrecking ball. I use that term to the DEI complex, and I think we're seeing today that prediction was spot on because DEI is in retreat, and that retreat is going to hasten after the employment office
Go ahead.
ruling here gets the time.
Fine, John. Take a victory lap, John. Go ahead.
I am. I'm not afraid to spike the football once in a while.
So you argue in your piece that the Ames would be a death blow to formal DEI. Now you're seeing the EEOC go after the most prominent newspaper in the country. For years, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act technically prohibited discrimination against any race, but courts applied a higher burden to the majority group plaintiffs. So a lot of people don't even know that this two-tier enforcement existed. So how do you think this double standard survived for as long as it did?
That is a great question. I think it survived because of the pressure of DEI, right? I think there was sort of this acceptance for many people that it was kind of okay to discriminate because we're pursuing a more diverse, racially balanced, sexually balanced society. And I think people did just accept it. And you had, to go back, Austin, you said a lot of people can share first person experiences with this. I have a friend in the banking industry, And his career, he had to watch going nowhere year after year after year because there was sort of this, unspoken but kind of spoken too practice of just hiring certain people because they checked the box as far as DEI. And his career stalled because of that. And he was very frustrated, but, kept working. But I think everybody knows, can cite an example of that happening. Now, is that always the case? I think your brain can say, like, gosh, I was discriminated against and I should have got that. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. But at least now we have the same standard for everyone. Everyone gets the same standard. If I believed that I was being discriminated against for a job, now I can go, I have the means to go file suit the same as everyone else. That's what the Civil Rights Act has always been about, just treating people equally. But somewhere along the line, you had it like equal meant giving preference to certain groups. And that is not what the text of the Civil Rights Act is about.
What would you say to your fellow whites who are listening, John, if they feel like they've been discriminated against? Should they file a lawsuit on behalf of the white race?
Not on the behalf of any race. I would say now, if you have not just a belief that this happened, but if you can cite documents, emails, and this goes back to the Times, that they have all of that. They have internal emails, they have Slack communications. All of this is going to support that case that you had somebody that was being discriminated against because of his race. I would say if you have that, there's no reason you shouldn't file a lawsuit. Because this is the only way that you're going to get DEI fully eradicated is if people say when they are being blatantly discriminated against, if they do take legal steps to have that action resolved. And because let's back up 5 years, 10 years, you had companies that were kind of, I include this in the piece, that they're basically saying white guys need not apply. Right? This was happening in broad daylight and very little was happening. Now you can retroactively and go file a suit and say, hey, I should have had that job. And this is how you're going to get change. To me, it's very sad it took this. And I don't even like the federal government be involved in hiring to this degree. I have problems about that. But here's the fact of the matter is we do have a federal law that makes it very clear you can't be using race or sex to hire people. So you need to enforce the law when that's happening.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to law and order, it ought to be colorblind. Relaxing McGroin says, go ahead, my white brethren. Even my black side is with you. So what if you're half white, John? Can you say it was my half white? They discriminated against me 50%.
That's a great example. And let me just say, it shows just how ridiculous we've become with race in this country. And just to say, go back and look at what this law is meant to be. It's meant to say everyone should have the same opportunity as everyone else. It's a very simple thing. Well, we've taken race and we've really warped it. And we got to look, there is a racial history in America that kind of, ran ahead of that, right? We know we know Jim Crow, we know the history of slavery. All of that kind of factored in to this idea that now we got to give racial balance to have greater equity. Well, no, that's not why we passed the Civil Rights Act. And we got to look at what is a society supposed to be about? And it's about treating people equally and not using race in this way. But that's what we've seen the last 10, 15 years is race weaponized in ways that's very unhealthy. And it's really been to the detriment of society as a whole.
He says with his blue eyes and his pearly white skin and
Don't
his
shame
white
me.
privilege, his white privilege. John, we love having you on so much that we've literally named a segment Mondays with Miltimores. It's your time slot. We're just living in it. Where can we go if we're addicted to the take from Jon Miltimore?
I'm on Substack. I'm right in there. I got several good pieces coming out this week. Even one, I got to say, one of the pieces I was very excited to write. Have we talked about the TV show on Apple, Austin Pluribus?
No.
So go watch it. So I'll give you, this is my 30-second plug, but Vince Gilligan, I'm a huge Vince Gilligan fan. He's the guy that did Breaking Bad. Pluribus is a new show, and it's kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but with a much better twist. And they're more benign. They're gonna snatch your bodies, but they're doing it for good reasons and to make us a happy hive. It's a wonderful show. It's I think probably the second best show on TV today. Go check it out. I got some thoughts on it that'll be coming out later this week on Substack. The Take by Jon Miltimore.
Jon Miltimore, we'll see you next Monday, sir. Thank you, man.
Yeah,
For
have a great
defending
week,
the
JP.
white race. Bye, John. Speaking of what?
I keep trying to tell everyone that, they try to put me in a box. I didn't run to be a political party. I didn't run to be a politician. I ran because I experienced what city leadership failure at the ultimate level is. That's why I stepped up. That's what cuts through. So the media and everyone wants to jump on and be like, oh, Spencer's our guy. No, I'm the citizen. I'm the angry taxpayer. You can be a Democrat and love me. You can be a Republican and love me. The only people that don't love me are communists and socialists, and I don't want them to love me. I keep trying to tell everyone that, they try to put me in a box.
It's my boy Spencer Pratt, Blue. All right, well, don't go away, guys. Brandon Webb, Navy SEAL, sniper instructor, and now author, joins us when we come back from the break to talk about raising kids. Don't go anywhere. Check out forlibertyshop.com while you wait. We'll be right back. This is the Wake Up America show, and you're watching and listening to the For Liberty Network.
In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up, he keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal.
'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. George Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com.
This summer isn't about sunscreen and safe spaces. It's about liberty, laughs, and looking like a red, white, and righteous badass. Welcome to the Summer of Freedom collection. Beach towels bold enough to trigger a liberal arts professor. Tank tops louder than a 4th of July fireworks finale. And mugs that scream, "Don't tread on my caffeine." Whether you're storming the sandbar or just grilling like George Washington with a Bluetooth speaker, this is the gear that lets everyone know. You're not here to play woke. You're here to play cornhole with conviction. So crack open a cold one, fire up the freedom, and rock the merch that makes communists cry. The Summer of Freedom is here, and it's absolutely unapologetic.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support.
Thanks for sticking around on the Wake Up America show. I'm Austin Peterson. Glad to have you here. It's time to rise in freedom, America. Brandon Webb, my next guest, is a former U.S. Navy SEAL. His last assignment was course manager for the Elite SEAL Sniper Program. He's been awarded the Navy Commendation Medal with a V for Valor, and the Presidential Unit Citation for his platoon's deployment to Afghanistan after September 11th. Now he's written a book called Puddle Jumpers, a practical guide to raising confident, resilient kids without breaking them in the process. Welcome to the Wake Up America show, Brandon. So when people think snipers, they think, yes, I need to teach my kids some of these skills. Welcome to the show, sir. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for serving your country. We're grateful to have you here today. So, Brandon, you spent your career, you're training some of the toughest human beings on the planet, and then you become a dad, and then you realize that your entire framework for building mental toughness was wrong. So, what was the moment that kind of cracked that open for you?
Well, I think the statement that or the realization that I came to is that most parents' idea of building resilience in kids is wrong, right? And especially, I think we're at a point in America today where there's a lot of confusion out there, right? We don't even know what's real in the news cycle anymore, let alone, how do we parent? Because there's no manual that comes with the kids. I think the one thing that really helped me as a dad, and look, I'm proof. My kids are 24, 22, 19. They're happy. They're living their own lives. And I'm proof that, a divorced dad who left the Navy in 2006, lost my first business, lost my life savings, can still have a great co-parenting relationship with my kid's mom, because I ended up getting divorced after I left the Navy in 2006. And we were able to raise, happy, confident kids in a world that we're in today, which is extremely negative. But the point I'm making is, for me, what I realized when I became a young father was that a lot of this mental management I used to train Navy SEAL snipers applies to kids, and it's, replacing negative self-talk with positive self-talk. How we used to speak to the students, when we modernized the program in 2002, we stopped pointing out the mistakes that students would make, because we realized we're programming them for failure. Like if I'm training you, Austin, on a sniper rifle, a common mistake in the beginning on a high-powered rifle is people develop a flinch. And if I say, Austin, stop flinching, now all you're thinking about and obsessing about is flinching. And so it points out how important our language is or the language that we use around students, but also our children. And so that I realized that, and I was fortunate enough to have this toolkit to fall back on as a dad, because like I said, there's no training manual when you have a kid. You just kind of wing it.
Yeah. You talk about how real toughness is built through emotional safety, not through pressure, trying to pressure your kids, or harsh discipline, which kind of sounds counterintuitive to a lot of our audience, people who are raised the old-fashioned way. So right. So kind of make the case for why this isn't soft parenting.
Yeah, I think first of all, the biggest misconception people have when they see a book by a Navy SEAL on parenting, they think I'm just going to hold the kid by the hair and dunk him in the pool. That's how we learn.
Waterboard him. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is not the case. I think that the toughness comes from exposing your children to everyday stressors. There's a part when I talk about in puddle jumpers, there's this experiment done in Arizona in the 90s where they were trying to experiment with what it would be like to colonize Mars. So they had this big biosphere dome and they were growing plants and trees and everything else. And they realized the trees would get to a certain height and just fall over. And these scientists were like, why is this happening? And then they realized that the trees were missing the stress of wind in order to grow strong roots. So they would just grow so high and then fall over. And I feel like the same applies to kids. And when I was writing Puddle Jumpers, I was researching a lot of different programs, and they actually said that the kids that experience everyday stressors, I'm talking about, asking for things themselves, right? There's this example of a story I told when my youngest, we were in the Portland airport in Oregon, and he saw his favorite Timbers player, which was the MLS team in Portland. And he's like, Dad, can you go ask for an autograph? And I was like, buddy, you can do this yourself. And so I had this whole prep talk with him, and he's maybe 7 years old, and then shyly walked over, asked for the autograph. Next thing I know is me and his siblings are looking at him, and he's got the whole team, they're taking selfies, and he came back with a big confident smile on his face. And those are the kind of moments that I think typical parent, like a lot of mistakes parents would make out of convenience, is just go ask for the autograph for their kid. But these tiny things stack up, and it is kind of, I've had parents, when I was when my kids were younger, they would say, oh, I can't believe you let your 15-year-old go to Spain for a summer to learn Spanish all by himself. I'm like, no, these are kind of things that you can do for children, and they're actually gifts because you're giving them confidence and you're showing them that you trust them to go on a trip like that and make good decisions. But anyway, that's kind of my
this is good stuff. My wife over in the chat, you're confirming all of her biases right now. She loves this because we do have these conversations. We've got a little one who's almost 2, and we're talking about discipline and things. And yesterday we had a little thing where she just kind of like made a mean little kick at our dog, and we have to correct her and say, okay, now we got to be gentle with the dogs. All these things, but you have this desire to correct them and to do so forcefully. So you have to kind of hold yourself back without being overly permissive. It's like this question of helicopter parenting versus letting them do whatever they want at any time. So how do you sort of calibrate? How do you lock in the rifle of parenting, Brandon? How do you zero it in so that you're not overly permissive, but also not overly looking over their shoulder for every possible mistake?
Yeah, I think, it's natural to be protective. When the kids are younger, it's the behavior corrections are much clearer, like cut and dry, right? In your instance, with the dog, like that's a very clear behavioral issue. It's easy to correct. You kind of, but you have to correct it, right? And there has to be consequences. Like that's the other thing. And I talk about follow through, right? It's easy to make threats as a parent, but you never want to threaten something that maybe it's a big trip you've been planning for months, and you don't want to use that as a threat because you've invested money and planned for this whole.
Well, like SeaWorld?
Yeah, like my SeaWorld story. But in that case, I was buying tickets the day of. So
okay, well, tell that story because that was a good one.
Yeah, so I remember when my ex, she first told me, she's like, I can't believe these kids are so smart. She was driving them to school, the 2 younger ones, and she was like, don't stop yelling or I'm going to do this. And she overheard my daughter say to my youngest Tyler, she's like, she'll just forget in a few minutes. Don't worry about it. And that's like, these kids are like, conspiring at, 4 years old, 6 years old. They're very smart. They pay attention. So, and I remember that. So now fast forward a few years, I'm taking them to SeaWorld, and they're misbehaving in the back of my Toyota Tacoma. And I was like, guys, calm down and behave, or else I'm turning this car around and we're not going to go to SeaWorld. And then they're just like, they kept at it. And I just slowly merged off the next exit, and it got real quiet in the truck. And they're like, Dad, what's happening? I was like, I told you guys we're going home. And then just Tear Factory turned on. But 2 weeks later, when we went back, they were like completely well behaved. And so that, you know, and when you do this young when you start them like this young, it becomes much easier. I used to get so many compliments when the kids were, you know, like 8, 10, 12, and we'd be out in a nice restaurant and they're like, I can't believe how well behaved your kids are. I'm like, well, that's because I started early. You know, you gotta, you know, really, start off early with the consequences but I would say it does get more complicated later. We had a couple situations that I talk about in the book where we over punished because we had this emotional reaction. And I think that's, for parents, as their kids get older, the behavior situations become much more complicated. And in particular, what I'm talking about is my youngest got suspended from school, and his mom and I were ready to just throw the book at him. And once we discovered what happened, we ended up taking his side, and he got no punishment because it was a situation where a teacher had said some pretty nasty things to him as a 12-year-old 7th grader. And she had had many complaints about her before we found out, talking to the principal. And we ended up taking his side, and he was hugely relieved. And that was a situation where a lot of parents, including ourselves, would have just maybe had a tendency to over punish. And in reality, this kid is suffering. He's 12 years old. He's struggling with this teacher who is an adult in a position of power, kind of abusing him and like saying nasty things to him in front of his students. So that's why I wrote a whole checklist for discipline and puddle jumpers, so parents could take the emotion out of it and really get to kind of the heart of the behavior.
This is useful stuff, especially for me and my wife, who, you know, we have one little baby girl. We hope to have more. And we're having these conversations right now about discipline, about overly parenting, about listening to your kids and making emotional space for them. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm speaking to Brandon Webb. He is a New York Times bestselling author, dad of 3, former Navy SEAL. We're talking about his book, Puddle Jumpers. And in this book, Brandon, you talk about using visualization as a tool to reduce anxiety and to build confidence in kids. So this is a technique that is used across elite athletics and military training. Talk to us a little bit about visualization and how that applies across from the Navy SEALs to parenting.
Yeah, so people may, if anyone has read Michael Phelps' books or watched the recent Winter Olympics, you could see before a lot of the skiers and snowboarders would take their run, they're kind of closing their eyes and their hand movements are going around. They're visualizing their run before they take it. And visualization is something that is incredibly powerful. There's a story I also tell in Puddle Jumpers about a Navy pilot that was shot down over Vietnam and was a prisoner of war for 4 years, came back. His first round of golf, he played 9 holes and shot a par, having not touched a club in over 4 years. And it was because when his Navy buddies were like, this is crazy, how is this possible? He's like, guys, I've been playing perfect golf in my head for 4 years. this stuff really works. We teach it to sniper students, how to visualize. Also, not only how to visualize for perfect performance, but how to visualize when things go wrong. Like there are certain things that we know that can happen, whether you're flying an airplane or shooting a rifle, things that could go wrong that you can plan for and visualize the scenario and become very competent at dealing with emergency situations or things that come up. And so if it works in the Olympic arena and the SEAL arena, why can't it apply to kids? And the first time it was a simple request, my oldest, Jackson, was super nervous. He had to give a presentation in front of his first grade class. And so I just worked with him, the night before on visualization techniques, imagining him. I was like, close your eyes, imagine the classroom, what you have to do, go up there and just give your speech. You're going to be nervous. We just really create a real kind of virtual environment on the visualization. And the kids, what happened was we practiced so much. He gave the speech the next day and he was like, Dad, man, I felt so much. I didn't feel as nervous as I thought because I'd done it so much in my head. And then, this is a kid that went on to become a All-American national debate champion when he was in Oregon. So the stuff works. Visualization.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful to hear, Brandon. In this book, Puddle Jumpers, you also talk about an approach that you use for raising kids where you set high expectations and then you give high support. But in practice, usually a lot of parents tend to collapse into one or the other. They either demand too much from kids or they protect too much. So how do you hold both simultaneously without losing that tension that makes either one meaningful?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we can do, at least for me, the biggest mission of any parent has of their kids is one, raising a healthy, happy, confident kid and helping them discover what they're passionate about. I see too many parents, especially what I would call like high performing career parents, try and push their idea of the world on their children, whether that's like the lost dream or the common one is we see the pageant parent or the pageant mom, it's just like, these poor kids just are like living the parent's dream. And that's a big mistake. I can't tell you how many adults I've run into in New York City who are lawyers, doctors, and did it for their family and are absolutely miserable. And I didn't want kids like that. So the big thing is put your kids in challenging situations to address your question on expectations. Put them in challenging situations where they're going to have to, I call it like manufacturing adversity, where they're going to be challenged, that they're going to be failure, and have the conversations with them that failing is part of the learning process and praise that process. The problem is, and there's plenty of data to back this up, which I talk about in Puddle Jumpers, is just praising your kid. Oh, you're the smartest, you're the best. That whole phase we went through, I think the millennial generation, where it was the participation trophy. The data says that doesn't work. They did a study in Stanford where they had two sets of kids, and one group was praised for effort and the other was just praised for being smart and the best no matter what they did. And as the tasks got harder and harder for these two groups, the groups that were just praised for being so smart, they shut down because they were afraid to lose that label. They were like, I don't want to take a risk because I'm going to seem maybe stupid to this group that's praising me for being like the smartest ever. And in the risk taker group just went off the charts because they were not afraid to try, fail, try again, and then get some success. So that's like parenting 101.
This is great stuff. Great stuff.
That's what we need to do with the kids.
And my wife tuned in over in the chat, says this book, she's excited for it. The book is Puddle Jumpers, Powerful Mental Techniques from Navy SEAL Performance Coach and Father of Three, Brandon Webb, who joined us live here this morning on the show. Thanks for being so generous with your time, Brandon. Thanks for writing the book. Is there anything else that you think that we missed or would like to share or plug before we let you go?
No, just don't be afraid to let your kids jump in those puddles.
Sounds good.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Brandon. Hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you very much for your service here in this country. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you.
Justin J. Pearson, and I'm running for president of BSG. There are a few reasons that we're running this campaign this year. One has to do with representation. How can we represent all voices in a conversation? I wanted to do this by partnering with organizations from the Bowdoin Democrats to the Bowdoin Republicans. I want to bring together different voices, dissenting voices, voices that may be more liberal or more conservative, in order that we can reach a point of sort of the radical middle.
Here, you've had 3 strikes laws, mass incarceration, denied us of who we are, and we are still here. And today, you'll take the only majority black district from us. But I want you to know, and I want my nephew, sons, and the future to know, no matter what you do, No matter how much you try and break us.
It's a grift. It's a grift. Right? It's performative. You know what it reminds me of a little bit? It's like this.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all. I'm blickety black, blacker than black, black, I'm blacker than black, yo, because I'm black and I'm back. Yo, I'm black and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all,
And I'm blacker than black because I'm black, y'all. Guys, was this a freaking amazing show? We had a Navy SEAL. We had Jon Miltimore. We had Tom Pappert talk about the Tennessee redistricting. If you missed a single minute of this show today, you're crazy. You need to run it back because I'm sorry, but this kind of quality podcasting, you are not going to find anywhere else. Did we do it? We unlocked the did we unlock the bonus content? Well, because I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all. Way to go! Because I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, which means you guys get to enjoy the bonus content. Thank you so much for your financial generosity. I'm so thankful that you love the show. I can't wait to see you again tomorrow, where we'll have even better guests, even better content. I mean, you're just not going to get this anywhere else. So thank you for your support. Glad you enjoy it. Have a wonderful day, because I'm black, y'all.
Get you black and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black and you black and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blickety black, 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 y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, because I'm black.
In the rolling countryside of Chester County, Pennsylvania, on January 1st, 1745, a boy was born with fire in his blood and thunder in his soul. His name was Anthony Wayne. Tall, handsome, hot-tempered, and born to fight. He was a surveyor and landowner before the war, but when the Revolution exploded in 1775, Wayne immediately raised a regiment and marched off to war. By 1776, he was a colonel, and by 1777, a brigadier general. Washington quickly noticed this fiery Pennsylvanian, who never backed down from a fight. Wayne fought like a man possessed. At Brandywine, he held the line until it shattered. At Germantown, he led a savage charge through fog and smoke. At Monmouth in 1778, he rallied broken troops under blistering heat and turned a near disaster into a stand-up fight against the British regulars. But it was on the night of July 15, 1779, that Mad Anthony carved his name into legend. The British had seized Stony Point, a rocky fortress on the Hudson River that threatened West Point and controlled vital supply lines. It was considered nearly impregnable. Steep cliffs, a battis of sharpened stakes, and heavy cannon. Washington needed it taken, but not with a long siege. He needed it taken by storm. He gave the job to Anthony Wayne. At midnight, under a pale moon, Wayne led 2,300 hand-picked men in a silent bayonet attack. No loaded muskets, only cold steel. Wayne's orders were simple and brutal. Fix bayonets and charge. As they crept forward through the darkness, a sentry fired a warning shot. The British opened up with cannon and musket fire. Wayne was hit in the head by a musket ball that knocked him to the ground. Blood pouring down his face, he staggered up, refused to be carried to the rear, and roared to his men, "Forward! Forward! I'll storm hell itself if you follow me!" His troops exploded out of the night like wolves. They tore through the abatis with axes and bayonets, swarmed over the walls, and engaged in savage hand-to-hand combat. In just 30 minutes, the impregnable fort was theirs. The Americans suffered only 15 killed and 83 wounded. The British lost over 600 men killed, wounded, or captured. Congress struck a gold medal for Wayne. The victory electrified the country. The British began calling him Mad Anthony, half in fear, half in mockery of his reckless courage. Wayne wore the nickname like a badge of honor. He fought on through the brutal Southern campaigns, leading the elite light infantry corps. At Yorktown in 1781, his men were among the first to storm the British redoubts. When Cornwallis surrendered, Mad Anthony was there, saber at his side, watching the old order fall. After the war, Wayne wasn't finished fighting. In 1792, President Washington called him back to command the Legion of the United States against the Northwest Indian Confederation. At the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794, the aging general delivered a crushing victory that finally secured the Ohio Country for America. Anthony Wayne died on December 15, 1796, at age 51 while returning from his final campaign. He was buried at Fort Presque Isle, later moved to Pennsylvania. His men and his enemies both agreed. There was never anyone quite like Mad Anthony. He was hot-headed, vain, sometimes reckless, and always aggressive. But when the situation looked hopeless, when others counseled caution, Anthony Wayne charged straight into the guns with bayonets fixed and fire in his eyes. From the blood-soaked walls of Stony Point to the smoke-filled fields of fallen timbers, Mad Anthony Wayne lived up to his name. He didn't just fight for American independence, he attacked it with everything he had, daring the enemy to try and stop him. A man who stormed hell itself and lived to tell the tale.
'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. George Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com.